The moment my cousin Jessica rolled her eyes and whispered to my aunt about my embarrassing little hobby. I never imagined that same hobby would one day have her begging me to teach her teenage daughter how to save money. But there I was, 3 years later, watching my phone buzz with desperate messages from family members who had once mocked my Sunday morning ritual of clipping coupons at the kitchen table. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Maya Chen, and if you had told me at 24 that my obsession with saving 15 cents on toothpaste would eventually turn into a financial empire that would change my entire family's perspective on money, I would have laughed harder than they did. Back then, I was working as a receptionist at a dental office in Portland, Oregon, making barely enough to cover my rent in the tiny studio apartment I shared with more cockroaches than I cared to count. Every dollar mattered, and every penny saved felt like a small victory in a world that seemed determined to drain my bank account dry. The whole thing started innocently enough. My grandmother, Nai, had always been a saver. She grew up during a time when wasting anything was considered a sin, and she passed that mentality down to me during the summers I spent at her house in Chinatown. While other kids were playing video games, I was learning how to stretch a dollar until it screamed for mercy. She taught me to read the grocery store flyers like they were treasure maps, to understand the rhythm of sales cycles, and to never ever pay full price for anything if I could help it. When I moved out on my own after college, those lessons became survival skills. My starting salary was laughable, my student loans were crushing, and my family's financial situation wasn't much better. My parents owned a small restaurant that barely broke even most months, and my younger brother David was still in college, adding to their financial strain. We weren't poor exactly, but we weren't comfortable either. We lived in that gray area where unexpected expenses could derail everything. That first apartment was a reality check wrapped in peeling wallpaper and a heater that worked only when it felt like it. The grocery bill alone was eating up nearly 40% of my income, and I quickly realized that if I wanted to survive, let alone thrive, I needed to get serious about stretching every dollar. So I did what Nai had taught me. I started paying attention to patterns, cycles, and opportunities that most people overlooked. Sunday mornings became sacred. While my roommate from college, now living in her parents' basement, slept off her Saturday night adventures, I would spread the weekly grocery flyers across my tiny kitchen table like a general planning a military campaign. I had a system. The Safeway flyer went on the left, Fred Meyer in the middle, and Walmart on the right. I would cross-reference prices, identify the best deals, and then spend an hour meticulously clipping coupons and organizing them in a small accordion folder that had seen better days. The first few months were rough. I made rookie mistakes like forgetting to check expiration dates on coupons, or not reading the fine print that said you needed to buy 5 items to get the deal. There were embarrassing moments at checkout when cashiers would shake their heads at my expired coupons, and other customers in line would sigh impatiently as I fumbled through my folder. But I kept at it, learning from each mistake, refining my approach. The breakthrough came when I discovered something that would change everything: coupon stacking. Most people didn't realize you could use a manufacturer's coupon and a store coupon on the same item, sometimes combined with a store sale, to get products for practically nothing. The first time I walked out of Safeway with $60 worth of groceries for $12, I felt like I had cracked some secret code that the rest of the world hadn't figured out. But my family didn't see it that way. The first time they witnessed my coupon process in action was during a family barbecue at my uncle's house in Beaverton. I had brought supplies for the party, including paper plates, napkins, and various snacks, all acquired through my coupon system for a fraction of their retail cost. When I mentioned how much I had saved, the reaction wasn't what I expected. Jessica, my cousin, who worked in marketing and always dressed like she had stepped out of a magazine, laughed that particular laugh that people reserve for things they find both amusing and pathetic. "Maya, you spent 4 hours on a Sunday to save $20, she said, shaking her perfectly styled hair. At that rate, you're making $5 an hour. Even McDonald's pays better than that. My Uncle Mark chimed in with his usual bluntness. It's just coupons, kiddo. It's not like you're building a business or anything. You're just being cheap. The word cheap hit differently than he probably intended. In his mind, it was a harmless joke. In mine, it felt like a dismissal of something that was keeping me afloat financially. My Aunt Linda, who had never worked outside the home but somehow always had opinions about everyone else's finances, added her 2 cents. When I was your age, I just asked my parents for money when I needed it. All this coupon stuff seems so desperate. The word hung in the air like smoke from my uncle's grill. Desperate. As if trying to save money was something to be ashamed of. Even David, my own brother, couldn't resist joining in. Sis, you're like one of those extreme couponing people on TV. It's kind of weird, honestly. Just buy what you need and move on with your life. His comments stung the most because I expected family to understand, or at least support, my efforts to be financially responsible. My parents tried to be supportive, but I could see the concern in their eyes. They worried that I was becoming obsessed, that I was spending too much time and energy on something that seemed insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Maya, my mother said gently as we loaded my car with the party supplies later that evening, maybe you should focus more on advancing your career instead of spending so much time on coupons. There has to be a better way to improve your financial situation. Their words followed me home that night. As I sat in my studio apartment, surrounded by the evidence of my embarrassing hobby, I questioned everything. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was wasting my time. Maybe I was being desperate and cheap, and all the other things they had implied without saying directly. But then I looked at my bank account. For the first time since moving out, I had a small emergency fund. Not much, but enough to cover a car repair or a medical bill without panicking. I had money left over at the end of the month, instead of counting down the days until my next paycheck. My grocery budget had shrunk from $300 a month to less than $100, and I was eating better than ever because I could afford fresh produce and quality ingredients. More importantly, I was learning skills that went far beyond clipping pieces of paper. I was becoming an expert in consumer psychology, understanding how retailers priced their products and structured their promotions. I was developing negotiation skills, learning to advocate for myself when store policies seemed unfair or when cashiers made mistakes. I was becoming more organized, more strategic, and more confident in my ability to navigate complex systems. The research phase of my coupon process had expanded beyond simple price comparisons. I started tracking inventory cycles at different stores, noting when certain products went on clearance and how often sales repeated. I discovered apps and websites that aggregated deals, and I learned to use technology to streamline my process. What had started as a desperate attempt to save money was evolving into something more sophisticated. I began to see opportunities everywhere. When CVS launched a new rewards program, I was among the first to figure.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Out how to maximize the benefits. When Walgreens changed their coupon policy, I adapted my strategy accordingly. I started building relationships with store managers and employees, learning about upcoming promotions before they were advertised. My small accordion folder grew into an organized system of binders, spreadsheets, and apps. The real turning point came about 6 months after the family barbecue incident. I was at Rite Aid, working through a particularly complex deal that involved manufacturer coupons, store coupons, and a buy-2-get-one-free promotion on vitamins. The math was intricate, but if executed correctly, I would get $90 worth of supplements for about $15. The cashier, a middle-aged woman named Dolores who had seen me enough times to recognize my face, watched with growing amazement as the total kept dropping with each coupon scan. "Honey," she said as she handed me my receipt, "I've been working retail for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone work the system like you do. You should be teaching classes or something." Her comment was casual, throwaway, but it planted a seed that would grow into something much bigger. That night, I started calculating not just my savings, but the value I was creating. Over the past year, I had saved over $3,000 on everyday purchases. But more than that, I had accumulated a stockpile of household essentials that would last for months. My tiny apartment had been transformed into a miniature warehouse, with shelves lining the walls holding everything from toiletries to cleaning supplies to non-perishable food items. I started taking pictures of my hauls, not for social media bragging rights, but to document the value I was creating. A grocery trip that would have cost $150 at regular prices was costing me $30 after coupons and sales. A drugstore run that should have been $60 was down to $8. The numbers were becoming impossible to ignore. More importantly, I realized that my hobby was creating real financial security. The money I wasn't spending on overpriced consumer goods was being invested in my future. I had started a small investment account, begun paying extra on my student loans, and even started contributing to a retirement fund. The 15 cents I saved on toothpaste was multiplying into real wealth, but the family remained skeptical. At my cousin's wedding that fall, the jokes continued. Jessica, now married to a lawyer and living in a house that cost more than I made in 3 years, made sure to ask loudly enough for others to hear, "Maya, are you still doing that coupon thing? Didn't you outgrow that yet?" Her new husband smirked as if he was in on some private joke about my financial situation. The other cousins picked up the thread. "Remember when Maya used to bring those little folders everywhere? I heard she has like a whole room full of soap and shampoo. It's like hoarding, but legal." Each comment chipped away at my confidence, making me second-guess decisions that had been improving my life in measurable ways. Even the older generation got involved. My grandfather, usually supportive of my endeavors, pulled me aside during the reception. "Maya, you're a smart girl with a good education. Maybe it's time to focus on bigger things than saving a few dollars here and there. Your cousins are advancing in their careers, buying houses, starting families. What are your plans beyond couponing?" Their message was clear. What I was doing wasn't valuable, wasn't sophisticated, wasn't worthy of respect. I was the family member who had gotten stuck in survival mode, while everyone else was thriving. The successful ones had moved beyond worrying about money in small increments. They dealt in big numbers, important decisions, real achievements. That night, sitting in my car outside the wedding venue, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of abandoning my system, I would expand it. Instead of feeling ashamed of my financial discipline, I would embrace it completely. If they thought I was obsessed with couponing, they hadn't seen anything yet. I spent the next 3 months transforming my approach entirely. The casual Sunday morning routine became a sophisticated business operation. I invested in proper storage solutions, turning my studio apartment into an efficiently organized distribution center. I created detailed spreadsheets, tracking not just savings but inventory turnover, space utilization, and return on investment for the time I spent. The research component expanded dramatically. I subscribed to industry publications that tracked consumer goods pricing, learned about supply chain management, and started understanding retail mathematics from the store's perspective. I began to see patterns that went far beyond individual deals. I could predict when products would go on clearance, anticipate seasonal pricing cycles, and identify opportunities weeks in advance. My network expanded beyond store employees to include other serious couponers, deal bloggers, and even some retail industry insiders. Through online forums and local meetups, I connected with people who shared my passion for maximizing value. These weren't desperate people trying to survive paycheck to paycheck. Many were financially successful individuals who understood that managing expenses was just as important as increasing income. The sophistication of my operation grew exponentially. I developed relationships with multiple stores across the metro area, learning each location's specific policies, inventory patterns, and staff personalities. I timed my shopping trips to coincide with restocking schedules, clearance markdowns, and promotional changeovers. What had started as a simple money-saving strategy had evolved into something approaching retail arbitrage. The stockpile grew beyond personal use. I had enough household products to last for years, and I started calculating the replacement cost of my inventory. The numbers were staggering. My tiny apartment contained thousands of dollars worth of consumer goods that I had acquired for hundreds of dollars. The value I had created was undeniable, even if my family couldn't see it. But the breakthrough moment that would change everything came from an unexpected source. My mother's friend Patricia, a woman I had met only a few times at family gatherings, called my mother one evening with an unusual request. Patricia's daughter Emma was getting married and trying to plan a wedding on a tight budget. She had heard through my mother that I was good with saving money and wondered if I might have any advice about cutting costs without sacrificing quality. My mother, slightly embarrassed by the implication that our family needed someone else's expertise in financial matters, reluctantly asked if I would mind talking to Patricia. She framed it as a favor we were doing, not as recognition of any particular skill on my part. But when Patricia called me directly that evening, the conversation took a direction that surprised both of us. "Maya," she said after we had exchanged pleasantries, "your mother mentioned that you're really good at finding deals on things. Emma is trying to plan her wedding, and the costs are just astronomical. We're wondering if you might know some tricks for saving money on wedding supplies." I started with basic suggestions about timing purchases around sales cycles, using coupons for things like decorative items, and buying in bulk from warehouse stores. But as we talked, Patricia's questions became more sophisticated. She wanted to understand not just how to save money, but how to think strategically about spending decisions. She asked about my process, my tools, and my results. When I mentioned that I had saved over $8,000 in the past 18 months through strategic shopping, Patricia went quiet. "Wait," she said finally. "You've saved $8,000? How is that even possible?" I explained my system in detail: the research, the planning, the execution, the tracking. I told her about inventory management, deal stacking, and price prediction. I described how what started as clipping coupons had evolved into understanding consumer markets, retail psychology, and financial optimization. By the time I finished, Patricia was asking questions that my own family had never thought to ask. "Maya," she said, her voice carrying a respect that I wasn't accustomed to hearing when people discussed my couponing, "this isn't just about saving money. You've basically built a small business around consumer goods procurement. Do you realize how valuable these skills are?" Her words hit me like a revelation. For the first time, someone was seeing my efforts not as a desperate attempt to pinch pennies, but as a sophisticated financial strategy. She understood that what I had developed went far beyond simple coupon clipping. I had created systems, processes, and expertise that had real commercial value. "Would you be willing to help Emma with her wedding shopping?" Patricia asked. "Not just with advice, but actually helping her plan and execute her purchasing strategy. We'd pay you for your time, of course." The offer caught me off guard. Someone wanted to pay me for the skills that my family had been mocking for 2 years. Patricia saw value where others saw embarrassment. She recognized expertise where others saw obsession. That conversation with Patricia changed everything. Within a week, I was sitting at Emma's kitchen table with spreadsheets, store flyers, and a detailed timeline for acquiring everything she needed for her wedding at a fraction of the retail cost. Emma, initially skeptical about the process, became increasingly excited as she saw the numbers. "You mean I can get all the candles for the centerpieces for $30 instead of $300? She asked, staring at the calculations I had prepared. "And the bridesmaid gifts for $50 instead of $200? The savings were real, significant, and achievable. But more importantly, the process I had developed was teachable and scalable. Word spread quickly through Patricia's circle of friends. Within a month, I had 3 more clients asking for help with various projects: a baby shower, a graduation party, and a kitchen renovation. Each project allowed me to apply my skills in different contexts, learning new markets and developing new strategies. The kitchen renovation project was particularly eye-opening. Sarah, a friend of Patricia's, needed to update her appliances, fixtures, and finishes on a tight budget. Using my approach to research, timing, and deal identification, we saved her over $4,000 on a project that would have cost $15,000 at regular prices. The transformation was dramatic, and Sarah couldn't stop talking about the results. More importantly, these projects were teaching me that my skills had applications far beyond personal grocery shopping. I was developing expertise in project management, vendor negotiation, and strategic procurement. The analytical skills I had honed through coupon stacking were transferring to complex purchasing decisions worth thousands of dollars. The financial results were becoming impossible to ignore. In addition to my own savings, which had grown to over $12,000 in 2 years, I was generating income from consulting clients. What had started as a favor for Patricia had grown into a side business that was earning me an additional $1,000 per month. But the real validation came when Sarah referred me to her sister-in-law, who worked in procurement for a mid-sized manufacturing company. During our initial consultation, she asked detailed questions about my methods, my tracking systems, and my results. At the end of our meeting, she made an observation that would stick with me forever. "Maya," she said, "what you've developed is essentially a scaled-down version of what I do professionally. You understand supplier relationships, pricing cycles, inventory management, and cost optimization. Have you ever considered applying these skills in a corporate environment?" Her suggestion opened up possibilities I had never considered. My embarrassing hobby had developed skills that were directly applicable to professional procurement, supply chain, management, and financial analysis. The expertise I had gained from clipping coupons was more sophisticated and valuable than I had realized. That realization prompted me to take a hard look at my career trajectory. I was still working as a receptionist, earning barely enough to cover my basic expenses, while developing expertise that could be worth significantly more in the right environment. The skills I was using to help wedding planners and homeowners could be applied to corporate purchasing, vendor management, and cost reduction initiatives. I started researching career opportunities in procurement and supply chain management. I discovered that many companies were actively seeking professionals who understood cost optimization, vendor relationships, and strategic purchasing. The analytical skills I had developed through couponing were directly relevant to roles that paid 2 or 3 times what I was earning as a receptionist. But first, I needed to deal with my family's continued skepticism. Despite the growing success of my consulting work, they remained convinced that I was wasting time and energy on an activity that wasn't worthy of serious consideration. The wedding projects were dismissed as, quote, helping friends, and the income was characterized as a little side money. The breaking point came during Christmas dinner at my parents' restaurant. The entire extended family was gathered around 2 large tables, sharing updates about career advances, home purchases, and other traditional markers of success. When the conversation turned to my year, I mentioned that I had started doing consulting work related to strategic purchasing and cost optimization. Jessica, now pregnant with her first child and more condescending than ever, laughed in that familiar way. "Maya, you're still talking about coupons. When are you going to get serious about your career?" Her husband nodded in agreement, as if my financial discipline was somehow preventing me from achieving real success. Uncle Mark chimed in with his usual subtle cruelty. "I heard you're charging people to help them shop. That's pretty creative, I'll give you that. But it's not exactly a career, is it?" The implication was clear. What I was doing was a clever side hustle at best, not something that deserved real respect or recognition. Even my parents seemed uncomfortable with the attention my work was getting. "Maya has always been good at finding deals," my mother said diplomatically, "but she's also looking into other career opportunities." The message was that my current success was temporary, something to be tolerated until I found a more conventional path. That night, driving home through the December rain, I made a decision that would change my relationship with my family forever. I was done being apologetic about my expertise. I was done minimizing my achievements to make others feel comfortable. I was done pretending that what I had built wasn't valuable just because they couldn't understand it. The next morning, I started documenting everything. I calculated my total savings over the previous 2 years, nearly $15,000. I tallied the income from my consulting clients, over $8,000 in 6 months. I inventoried the value of my stockpile, over $5,000 in household products acquired for less than $800. The numbers painted a picture of success that was difficult to dismiss. More importantly, I started researching the broader market for my skills. I discovered that corporate procurement specialists with my level of expertise were earning $60,000 to $80,000 annually. Supply chain analysts with similar analytical skills were commanding even higher salaries. Financial consultants who helped businesses reduce costs were building 6-figure practices. The gap between my current situation and my potential was enormous. I was earning $30,000 as a receptionist while developing skills that could be worth 3 times that amount. My family's dismissive attitude was keeping me from recognizing and pursuing opportunities that were right in front of me. The revelation that would change everything came from an unexpected conversation with my dentist. Dr. Martinez had noticed that I always paid my bills immediately and in full, despite working as a receptionist at a competing practice. During a routine cleaning, he asked about my financial planning strategies. When I mentioned my approach to cost optimization and strategic purchasing, his eyes lit up with interest. "Maya," he said, setting down his instruments, "I've been looking for someone to help me reduce costs in my practice. The margins in dentistry are getting tighter every year, and I need someone who understands how to negotiate with suppliers, optimize inventory, and find better deals on everything from office supplies to medical equipment. Would you be interested in taking on a project like that?" The opportunity he was describing was exactly what I had been preparing for without realizing it. All the skills I had developed through couponing, all the relationships I had built with vendors, all the analytical tools I had created were directly applicable to his business challenges. This wasn't about helping friends plan weddings or saving money on groceries. This was about applying my expertise to real business problems with measurable financial impact. Within 2 weeks, I was sitting in Dr. Martinez's office with a detailed analysis of his current spending patterns and a comprehensive plan for reducing costs across multiple categories. The potential savings were significant, over $20,000 annually through better vendor relationships, strategic timing of purchases, and optimization of inventory levels. But more importantly, Dr. Martinez understood the value of what I was offering. He wasn't interested in my services because he felt sorry for me or because he wanted to help a family friend. He was interested because I had demonstrated expertise that could solve real problems and generate measurable results for his business. The project with Dr. Martinez became a case study that would transform my consulting practice. Over 6 months, we implemented systems that reduced his operating costs by 18% while improving the quality of supplies and equipment in his office. The success was documented, measurable, and undeniable. Word spread through the local business community faster than I had anticipated. Within 3 months, I had consultations scheduled with 2 other dental practices, a veterinary clinic, and a small manufacturing company. Each project built on the previous one, allowing me to refine my methods and expand my expertise into new industries. The financial transformation was dramatic. By the end of that year, my consulting income had reached $4,000 per month, more than I was earning at my day job. The clients weren't hiring me out of charity, or because they needed help with basic couponing. They were hiring me because I had developed genuine expertise in cost optimization and strategic procurement. But the real validation came when I received a call that would change everything. Patricia, the woman who had first recognized the value of my skills, had been talking to her neighbor about the success of her daughter's wedding project. The neighbor, it turned out, was the chief financial officer of a regional retail chain, and he was facing pressure from corporate headquarters to reduce operational costs across multiple locations. "Maya," Patricia said during our phone call, "I know this might sound crazy, but would you be interested in meeting with a CFO about helping their company save money? He's been trying to find someone who understands retail purchasing and cost optimization, and I told him about the work you've been doing." The meeting was scheduled for the following week. As I prepared for the consultation, I realized that my embarrassing hobby had evolved into something that major corporations were willing to pay for. The skills that my family had mocked were now being sought after by executives who managed multi-million-dollar budgets. The consultation went better than I had dared to hope. The CFO, a man named Robert Chen, who had built his career around financial optimization, immediately understood the value of my approach. He didn't see couponing as a desperate money-saving tactic. He saw it as sophisticated consumer behavior analysis that could be applied to corporate procurement strategies. "Maya," he said as we concluded our meeting, "what you've developed is exactly what we need. You understand how retail pricing works from the consumer side, which gives you insights that most procurement professionals don't have. Would you be interested in a contract to analyze our purchasing across multiple categories and identify opportunities for cost reduction?" The contract he offered was worth more than I made in a year as a receptionist. But more importantly, it represented recognition of my expertise at the highest levels of business. This wasn't about helping friends or earning side income. This was about being valued as a professional whose skills could generate significant value for major corporations. That evening, I called my parents to share the news. The conversation was awkward at first, as they struggled to understand how their daughter's coupon hobby had led to a corporate consulting contract. But as I explained the scope of the project and the financial implications, their tone began to change. "Maya," my father said finally, "I have to admit I didn't understand what you were building. I thought you were just trying to save money on groceries. I didn't realize you were developing real business skills." My mother was more direct. "Honey, I owe you an apology. We should have supported what you were doing instead of making you feel embarrassed about it. You saw something that the rest of us missed, and you had the discipline to stick with it even when we were discouraging you." Their acknowledgement felt good, but it wasn't the validation I had been seeking. The real validation was coming from clients who valued my expertise, colleagues who respected my results, and opportunities that recognized my potential. The success of the retail chain project led to additional opportunities that exceeded my wildest expectations. Within 18 months, I had established a consulting practice that was generating six-figure annual revenue. The work was challenging, varied, and financially rewarding in ways that my original couponing had never been. But the personal transformation was even more significant than the financial success. I had gone from being the family member who was pitied for her desperate money-saving tactics to being the one who was sought out for financial expertise. The confidence I had gained from proving my abilities in the business world spilled over into every other aspect of my life. The relationships with my family began to heal as they started to understand what I had built. Jessica, now struggling with her own financial challenges as a new mother, asked for my help in reducing her household expenses. Uncle Mark, facing cost pressures in his own small business, wanted to learn about my approach to vendor negotiations. Even my brother David, who had once called my couponing weird, asked me to help him develop a budget and savings strategy as he prepared to graduate from college. The same family members who had dismissed my efforts were now recognizing their value. But the most meaningful acknowledgement came from Nai, my grandmother, who had taught me to value every penny. During a family dinner celebrating my consulting success, she pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Maya," she said in her accented English, "I always knew you understood what I was trying to teach you about money, but I never imagined you would take those lessons and build something so big. You have honored our family by showing that frugality and intelligence can create real wealth." Her words meant more to me than any business contract or financial achievement. She had planted the seeds of financial discipline in my childhood, and I had grown them into something that exceeded both of our expectations. As I reflect on the journey from that first Sunday morning with grocery store flyers spread across my kitchen table to building a successful consulting practice, I'm amazed by how much the outside world's perception shifted. What began as family mockery had transformed into professional respect. What started as desperate penny pinching had evolved into sophisticated business expertise. The skills I developed through couponing, analytical thinking, attention to detail, understanding of market dynamics, ability to identify opportunities, were always valuable. The difference was learning to see them through the right lens and finding the right context to apply them. Today, when family members ask about my success, I tell them that it started with refusing to be ashamed of taking money seriously. It grew through the discipline of continuous learning and improvement, and it flourished when I found people who could recognize the value of what I had built. The 15 cents I saved on toothpaste was never really about the toothpaste. It was about developing the mindset and skills that would eventually generate hundreds of thousands of dollars in value. It was about proving to myself and others that financial discipline, properly applied, could be a pathway to real prosperity. My relatives had laughed at my coupon obsession, dismissing it as embarrassing and desperate. But when Mom's friend asked about my savings empire, everything changed. Because by then, it really was an empire, built on the foundation of skills they had never bothered to understand, generating results they could no longer ignore. The girl who once felt ashamed of clipping coupons at family gatherings had become the woman that same family turned to for financial guidance. And that transformation taught me the most important lesson of all. Never let other people's limited vision define your potential. Sometimes the things they mock are exactly the things that will set you free. The corporate consulting contract with Robert Chen's retail chain turned out to be more challenging than I had anticipated. What looked straightforward on paper became a complex web of supplier relationships, corporate politics, and entrenched purchasing habits that had been in place for decades. The company operated 47 stores across 3 states, and each location had developed its own informal systems for ordering everything from cleaning supplies to office equipment. My first week involved visiting 12 different locations, meeting with store managers, and analyzing purchasing records that hadn't been properly organized in years. The inefficiencies were staggering. One store was paying premium prices for paper towels because the manager had a relationship with a local supplier who delivered personally. Another location was ordering the same office supplies from 3 different vendors, sometimes within the same week, because no one was tracking inventory levels or coordinating purchases. But the real eye-opener came when I started analyzing the company's relationship with their primary suppliers. The contracts were negotiated at the corporate level, but enforcement was inconsistent across locations. Some stores were receiving the negotiated discounts, while others were being charged standard rates for the same products. The lack of coordination was costing the company thousands of dollars monthly in missed savings opportunities. The challenge wasn't just financial, it was cultural. Many of the store managers had been with the company for years and viewed their purchasing autonomy as a privilege earned through experience. They weren't necessarily resistant to saving money, but they were skeptical of changes imposed by an outsider who had never worked in retail management. I needed to prove that my recommendations would make their jobs easier, not just save money for corporate headquarters. I started with the most obvious inefficiencies, focusing on products where the potential savings were large enough to be immediately noticeable. The paper products category was particularly wasteful, with stores paying anywhere from 40 to 60% above optimal pricing for items they used daily. By consolidating orders and timing purchases around promotional cycles, I was able to demonstrate immediate savings that averaged $1,500 per store in the first month. The success with paper products gave me credibility to tackle more complex categories. The cleaning supplies analysis revealed that the company was essentially paying for the same chemicals in different packages, sometimes from the same manufacturer under different brand names. By standardizing on concentrated formulas in bulk packaging, we reduced costs by 30% while actually improving cleaning effectiveness. But the breakthrough came when I applied my coupon stacking principles to the company's supplier negotiations. Most corporate purchasing focuses on negotiating better base prices, but I realized there were opportunities to layer additional discounts on top of the negotiated rates. Early payment discounts, volume bonuses, seasonal promotions, and manufacturer rebates could be combined to create savings that went far beyond traditional purchasing approaches. The first major success was with the company's office supply vendor. The existing contract provided a 15% discount off list prices, which seemed reasonable until I started analyzing the underlying pricing structure. I discovered that the list prices themselves were inflated, and the same products were available through alternative channels at lower base costs even before applying any discounts. More importantly, I found that the vendor offered additional incentives that weren't being utilized. A 2% early payment discount was available but never claimed, because the company's accounts payable department processed invoices on a standard 30-day cycle. Quarterly volume bonuses were earned but not properly tracked, so rebate opportunities were being missed. Even simple things like seasonal promotions weren't being coordinated with purchasing timing. By restructuring the relationship to capture all available discounts and incentives, we reduced office supply costs by 38% in the first quarter. The savings weren't just from better prices, they were from better systems that ensured every available discount was captured and properly applied. Robert Chen was impressed enough to expand my role beyond simple cost reduction. He wanted me to analyze the company's entire supply chain and identify opportunities for operational improvements that went beyond traditional purchasing. The project grew from a 6-month consulting contract to a full-time position as Director of Strategic Procurement, with a salary that was more than double what I had been earning as a receptionist. But the real transformation was in how I saw myself professionally. I was no longer the woman who had stumbled into consulting through a friend's wedding planning needs. I was a strategic procurement professional whose expertise was generating measurable value for a significant corporation. The skills I had developed through years of coupon optimization were being applied to million-dollar purchasing decisions. The success at the retail chain led to opportunities I hadn't imagined possible. Word spread through industry networks about the dramatic cost reductions we had achieved, and I started receiving calls from executives at other companies who wanted to understand our approach. Trade publications interviewed me about innovative procurement strategies. Professional organizations invited me to speak at conferences about supply chain optimization. Within 2 years, I had established enough credibility in the procurement profession to launch my own consulting firm. The transition from employee to business owner was scary but exhilarating. I was no longer implementing someone else's vision for cost reduction. I was developing my own methodologies and applying them to diverse industries with varying challenges. My first major client as an independent consultant was a mid-sized manufacturing company that was struggling with rising material costs. The owner, Maria Santos, had heard about my work through Robert Chen and was desperate for solutions that didn't involve laying off employees or reducing product quality. The manufacturing environment was completely different from retail, but the underlying principles of strategic procurement remained the same. The analysis revealed that the company was treating procurement as a necessary administrative function rather than a strategic business capability. Purchasing decisions were made by production managers who focused on avoiding stockouts rather than optimizing costs. Supplier relationships were managed informally, with little attention to contract terms or performance metrics. Inventory levels were determined by gut feelings rather than analytical forecasting. The transformation took 8 months and involved restructuring everything from supplier selection criteria to inventory management systems. We implemented vendor scorecards that balanced cost considerations with quality and reliability metrics. We negotiated new contracts that included performance incentives and penalty clauses. We established procurement protocols that ensured competitive bidding for all significant purchases. But the most impactful change was cultural. Instead of viewing procurement as paperwork, the company began to see it as a competitive advantage. Production managers learned to plan purchases around supplier promotional cycles. Quality control teams participated in vendor selection processes. Finance staff tracked procurement metrics as closely as they monitored sales performance. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Material costs decreased by 22% in the first year, while supplier quality metrics actually improved. More importantly, the company had developed internal capabilities that would generate ongoing savings long after my consulting engagement ended. Maria Santos became one of my strongest advocates in the manufacturing community. She referred me to other business owners who were facing similar challenges, and my client base expanded to include companies in industries ranging from food service to construction to professional services. Each engagement taught me something new about applying procurement principles in different contexts. The food service project was particularly interesting because it combined elements of both retail and manufacturing challenges. The client operated 15 restaurants across 2 cities, and food costs were consuming nearly 40% of revenue. The margins were thin, and small improvements in purchasing efficiency could make the difference between profit and loss. The complexity came from the perishable nature of many ingredients and the need to balance cost optimization with quality consistency. Customers expected the same dishes to taste identical whether they ordered at the downtown location or the suburban one. Any changes to procurement had to maintain quality standards while reducing costs. I spent 3 weeks working in different restaurants, observing ordering processes, analyzing inventory turnover, and understanding how purchasing decisions affected kitchen operations. The inefficiencies were similar to what I had seen in retail, but the consequences were more immediate. Over-ordering led to waste from spoilage. Under-ordering disrupted menu availability and disappointed customers. The solution involved implementing systems that I had originally developed for tracking household stockpiles, but adapted for commercial food service. We created inventory management protocols that balanced cost optimization with freshness requirements. We established supplier relationships that provided flexibility for varying demand while ensuring consistent pricing. We developed menu planning processes that coordinated with seasonal ingredient availability and promotional pricing. The financial impact was significant, with food costs dropping from 38% of revenue to 31% within 6 months. But the operational improvements were equally important. Kitchen staff reported less stress about ingredient availability, Customers noticed more consistent food quality. Restaurant managers had better visibility into costs and profitability by location and menu item. The success of the food service project led to my most challenging assignment yet, working with a regional hospital system to optimize their supply chain for medical equipment and supplies. Healthcare procurement involves regulatory compliance, patient safety considerations, and life-or-death reliability requirements that make cost optimization particularly complex. The hospital administrators were under pressure from insurance companies and government programs to reduce costs while maintaining the highest standards of patient care. They needed someone who could navigate the technical requirements of medical procurement while applying innovative cost reduction strategies. My reputation for achieving significant savings without compromising quality made me a candidate for the project. The learning curve was steep. Medical supplies aren't interchangeable, like office products or cleaning chemicals. Brand specifications are often mandated by physicians who have preferences based on training and experience. Regulatory approvals limit vendor options. Emergency situations require immediate availability regardless of cost considerations. But underneath the complexity, the fundamental procurement principles still applied. Suppliers had incentive structures that weren't being fully utilized. Volume discounts were available, but not coordinated across departments. Contract terms favored vendors because negotiation expertise was limited. Inventory management was inefficient because demand forecasting was underdeveloped. The breakthrough came when I realized that healthcare procurement could benefit from the same analytical approach I had applied to grocery shopping years earlier. Instead of looking for simple substitutions, I focused on understanding the total cost of ownership for medical supplies. This meant analyzing not just purchase prices but also storage costs, waste from expiration, and operational efficiency factors. For example, the hospital was purchasing surgical gloves from 6 different vendors, each preferred by different departments. By standardizing on 2 vendors who could provide equivalent quality at better pricing, we reduced inventory complexity while achieving volume discounts that saved 12% on an annual spend of over $300,000 for gloves alone. The success with surgical supplies led to expansion across other categories: pharmaceuticals, diagnostic equipment, even food service for patient meals. Each category required specialized knowledge, but the analytical framework remained consistent. Understand the market, identify inefficiencies, optimize supplier relationships, and implement systems that sustain improvements over time. The hospital project became a case study that established my reputation in healthcare procurement. Medical industry publications featured articles about our innovative approaches. Healthcare conferences invited me to present on supply chain optimization strategies. Other hospital systems began requesting consultations for their own procurement challenges. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Dr. Martinez, the dentist who had first hired me to reduce costs in his practice, called to congratulate me on the success I had achieved in healthcare procurement. He had read about the hospital project in a trade publication and wanted me to know how proud he was of what I had built. "Maya," he said during our phone conversation, "when I first asked you to help with my office supplies, I knew you were smart and thorough. But I had no idea you would become one of the leading experts in healthcare procurement. You've taken what started as a small project in my dental office and turned it into something that's helping entire hospital systems operate more efficiently." His words reminded me of how far I had traveled from those Sunday mornings clipping coupons at my kitchen table. The skills that had once been dismissed as an embarrassing hobby were now being applied to million-dollar healthcare budgets. The analytical thinking that had helped me save 15 cents on toothpaste was now optimizing procurement for life-saving medical equipment. The success in healthcare opened doors to opportunities that went beyond traditional consulting. I was invited to join the board of directors for a regional procurement professional organization. Universities asked me to guest lecture in their supply chain management programs. Government agencies consulted with me on public sector procurement reform initiatives. But perhaps the most significant opportunity came when I was approached by a private equity firm that was evaluating potential investments in supply chain technology companies. They wanted someone with practical procurement experience to assess the commercial viability of various software solutions and automation tools that claimed to optimize purchasing processes. The due diligence work was fascinating because it allowed me to see procurement challenges from an investor's perspective. Instead of focusing on immediate cost savings for individual companies, I was evaluating technologies that could transform how entire industries approach purchasing decisions. The analytical skills I had developed were now being applied to business strategy and investment analysis. One of the companies in the firm's portfolio was developing artificial intelligence software that could predict optimal purchasing timing based on market conditions, inventory levels, and demand forecasting. The technology was sophisticated, but the business model needed refinement to address real-world procurement challenges that went beyond simple price optimization. My recommendations helped reshape the product development roadmap to include features that procurement professionals actually needed: supplier relationship management, contract compliance monitoring, and risk assessment capabilities. The company's revenue grew by 200% in the following year, and my equity participation in the success provided financial returns that exceeded my consulting income. The investment success led to additional opportunities in the technology sector. I joined several advisory boards for companies developing procurement-related solutions. I participated in venture capital evaluation processes for supply chain startups. I even considered launching my own technology company focused on procurement optimization for small and medium-sized businesses. But the most rewarding work remained the direct consulting with companies that needed help solving complex procurement challenges. Each new client brought different industry dynamics, regulatory requirements, and organizational cultures. The variety kept the work interesting and continued expanding my expertise across diverse business sectors. One of the most challenging projects was with a construction company that was struggling with material cost volatility in a rapidly changing market. Construction materials like lumber, steel, and concrete could fluctuate dramatically in price from week to week, making project budgeting extremely difficult. Traditional procurement approaches weren't effective when market conditions were so unpredictable. The solution required developing procurement strategies that could adapt to market volatility rather than trying to avoid it. We implemented hedging techniques borrowed from commodity trading, established supplier partnerships that shared price risk, and created project management processes that could accommodate material substitutions when market conditions made original specifications uneconomical. The approach worked so well that the construction company's competitors began asking about our methodology. Within 6 months, I was consulting with 8 different construction companies, each adapting our volatility management techniques to their specific market conditions and project types. The construction industry work led to opportunities in other sectors that dealt with commodity price volatility: manufacturing companies that used metals and plastics, food processors that purchased agricultural commodities, and energy companies that needed to manage fuel costs. The procurement principles were universal, but each industry required specialized knowledge about market dynamics and regulatory considerations. By this point, my consulting firm had grown to include 3 full-time employees and a network of specialized contractors who could handle industry-specific assignments. We had established a reputation for solving procurement challenges that other consulting firms considered too complex or specialized to address profitably. The financial success was beyond anything I had imagined when I started clipping coupons to save money on groceries. My annual income had grown from $30,000 as a receptionist to over $400,000 as a procurement consultant and business owner. But more importantly, I had built something that created value for others, while utilizing skills that I was passionate about developing. The transformation of my family's perception had been gradual, but complete. Jessica, who had once mocked my coupon obsession, now consulted with me regularly about her own financial decisions. When she and her husband were considering refinancing their mortgage, she asked me to analyze the terms and conditions to ensure they were getting the best possible deal. Uncle Mark, who had dismissed my couponing as being cheap, hired my firm to optimize procurement for his own business when he was facing competitive pressure from larger companies. The cost reductions we achieved helped him maintain profitability while expanding his market share. Even my brother David, who had called my coupon system weird, asked me to help him evaluate job offers when he was considering career changes. He wanted someone who understood compensation analysis and could identify the total value of different employment packages beyond just base salary. But the most meaningful acknowledgement came during a family celebration for my grandmother's 85th birthday. The entire extended family was gathered at my parents' restaurant, sharing stories and celebrating Nai's long life. When the conversation turned to career achievements and family pride, my father stood up to make a toast. "I want to say something about Maya," he began, his voice carrying a seriousness that made the room go quiet. "When she was young, she used to sit with her grandmother, cutting out coupons and planning grocery trips. Some of us thought it was cute, but not particularly important. We were wrong." He paused, looking around the room at family members who had once dismissed my efforts. "Maya took those lessons about the value of money and turned them into something none of us imagined possible. She's helped businesses save millions of dollars. She's created jobs for other people. She's become an expert in something that started as a way to save a few cents on household products." The room was silent as he continued. "But more than that, she never gave up on what she believed was important, even when the rest of us didn't understand it. She had the courage to stick with her convictions and the intelligence to build something meaningful from them. We should all be proud of what she's accomplished, and we should learn from her example about perseverance and vision." His words meant more to me than any business success or financial achievement. The family that had once been embarrassed by my coupon obsession was now celebrating it as the foundation of professional success that had exceeded everyone's expectations. Nai, sitting at the head of the table with her eyes bright despite her age, reached over to squeeze my hand. "I always knew," she whispered in Chinese, "that you understood what I was trying to teach you. But even I didn't know how far you would take those lessons." As I looked around the table at family members who had once dismissed my efforts, I realized that the real transformation hadn't been in their attitudes, but in my own confidence about the value of what I had built. Their recognition was gratifying, but it was no longer necessary for my sense of professional identity or personal worth. The skills that had started with clipping coupons had evolved into expertise that was solving complex business problems for major corporations. The analytical thinking that had helped me optimize grocery spending was now being applied to supply chain challenges worth millions of dollars. The persistence that had sustained me through years of family skepticism had become the foundation for a successful consulting practice that was creating value for clients across diverse industries. Looking back on the journey from that first Sunday morning with grocery store flyers to building a procurement consulting firm, I was amazed by how much my understanding of my own capabilities had grown. What I had initially seen as a desperate attempt to stretch limited dollars had actually been the development of sophisticated business skills that were highly valued in the professional marketplace. The woman who had once felt embarrassed about organizing coupons in front of family members was now presenting procurement strategies to corporate executives and investment firms. The analytical skills that had been dismissed as obsessive were now being sought after by organizations that needed innovative approaches to cost optimization and supply chain management. But perhaps most importantly, I had learned that expertise can develop from the most unexpected sources. The ability to find value in overlooked opportunities, to analyze complex systems for optimization potential, and to implement sustainable improvements can be cultivated through any activity that requires careful attention to detail and systematic thinking. My coupon obsession had provided the training ground for skills that were applicable far beyond grocery shopping. The discipline required to track deals, analyze pricing patterns, and coordinate complex purchasing strategies had prepared me for challenges that I couldn't have anticipated when I was clipping manufacturer coupons from Sunday newspapers. The family members who had laughed at my savings empire had eventually realized that what they were laughing at was actually a sophisticated business capability in its early developmental stages. Their recognition had come slowly, but it was now complete and wholehearted. As I continued building my consulting practice and exploring new opportunities in procurement and supply chain management, I carried with me the lessons learned from those early days of family skepticism. The most important lesson was that external validation, while gratifying, isn't necessary for pursuing something that you believe has value. The second lesson was that skills can transfer in unexpected ways, and expertise developed in one context can often be applied successfully in very different environments. The analytical thinking required for coupon optimization was remarkably similar to the strategic analysis needed for corporate procurement decisions. The third lesson was that persistence in the face of skepticism can be one of the most valuable professional qualities. The ability to continue developing expertise even when others don't recognize its value is what separates people who achieve breakthrough success from those who abandon potentially valuable pursuits because of social pressure. My relatives had laughed at my coupon obsession because they couldn't see beyond the immediate activity to the underlying skills being developed. When Mom's friend asked about my savings empire, it marked the beginning of a recognition process that would eventually transform not only how my family saw my capabilities, but how I understood my own potential for professional achievement. The journey from family mockery to professional recognition had taught me that sometimes the things that seem most embarrassing or unconventional in the moment are actually the foundations for future success that exceeds everyone's expectations, including your own. The phone call that would change everything came on a rainy Thursday morning in March. I was reviewing supplier contracts for a textile manufacturer when my assistant knocked on my office door with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Maya, there's someone online too who says she's calling from Goldman Sachs. She wants to discuss a potential acquisition opportunity." The caller introduced herself as Jennifer Walsh, a managing director in Goldman's Mergers and Acquisitions division. A Fortune 500 company was looking to acquire specialized consulting firms that could help optimize their supply chain operations across multiple business units. My reputation in procurement consulting had apparently reached the attention of their corporate development team. "Ms. Chen, we've been tracking your work in the procurement space for several months. Our client is particularly impressed with the cost reductions you've achieved in healthcare and manufacturing sectors. They're interested in exploring whether your methodologies could be scaled across a much larger organization." The conversation that followed was surreal. We were discussing acquisition terms, integration strategies, and valuation multiples for a business that had started with me clipping coupons to save money on toothpaste. The potential buyer was offering enough money to ensure financial security for the rest of my life, along with a senior executive role overseeing procurement optimization across their entire global operation. The decision wasn't as straightforward as the financial terms might suggest. Selling the consulting firm would provide immediate wealth, but it would also mean giving up the independence and creative control that had made the work so satisfying. I would become an employee again, albeit a very well-compensated one, implementing someone else's strategic vision rather than developing my own solutions. I asked for 2 weeks to consider the proposal, using the time to carefully evaluate both the financial opportunity and the personal implications. The discussions with potential acquirers continued, with 3 different companies ultimately submitting formal offers. Each proposal included different combinations of upfront payments, earn-out provisions, and ongoing employment arrangements. The complexity of evaluating these offers reminded me of the analytical skills I had developed through years of optimizing coupon deals. Just as I had once compared different combinations of manufacturer coupons, store promotions, and rebate opportunities, I now needed to analyze the total value proposition of each acquisition offer across multiple variables and time horizons. After extensive analysis and consultation with financial advisors, I decided to accept an offer from a global consulting firm that specialized in operational excellence. The acquisition would provide immediate financial returns while allowing me to continue developing innovative procurement solutions on a much larger scale. The integration process would let me work with some of the most sophisticated supply chain challenges in the world. The transition from independent consultant to senior executive at a major consulting firm was both exciting and intimidating. My new role involved managing a team of 40 procurement specialists working with Fortune 100 clients across diverse industries. The scale of the projects was unlike anything I had handled previously, with individual engagements worth millions of dollars and affecting thousands of employees. But the fundamental principles remained the same. Whether optimizing procurement for a small dental practice or a multinational corporation, the key was understanding market dynamics, identifying inefficiencies, and implementing sustainable improvements. The analytical thinking that had started with grocery store coupons was now being applied to supply chain challenges that affected global commerce. The integration process brought me into contact with executive teams at some of the world's largest companies. CEOs and CFOs who managed budgets worth billions of dollars were seeking advice about procurement strategies that could generate significant competitive advantages. The expertise I had developed was now being valued at the highest levels of corporate leadership. The most rewarding aspect of the new role was mentoring younger consultants who were beginning their careers in procurement and supply chain management. Many of them had traditional business backgrounds with MBA degrees from prestigious universities, but they lacked the practical experience that comes from actually implementing cost optimization strategies in real-world environments. I shared stories about learning procurement through coupon optimization, emphasizing how hands-on experience with market dynamics and vendor relationships had provided insights that couldn't be gained through academic study alone. The unconventional path I had taken to expertise became a teaching tool for helping others understand the importance of practical application alongside theoretical knowledge. One of my mentees, a recent Harvard MBA named Alex, was initially skeptical about learning from someone whose procurement expertise had originated with grocery store coupons. His attitude changed after observing me in client meetings where CEOs deferred to my recommendations about supply chain strategies worth tens of millions of dollars. I realize now that expertise comes from understanding how markets actually work, not just studying how they're supposed to work in textbooks, he told me after a particularly successful client presentation. Your approach to analyzing vendor relationships and pricing structures is more sophisticated than anything we covered in business school. The success of my team's projects began attracting attention from industry publications and professional organizations. Harvard Business School invited me to speak about unconventional paths to supply chain expertise. The Wall Street Journal featured an article about procurement innovation that highlighted methodologies my team had developed. But the moment that crystallized how far I had traveled came during a client presentation to the board of directors of a major automotive manufacturer. As I explained our recommendations for optimizing their global supplier network, I noticed one of the board members taking detailed notes about analytical frameworks that had evolved from techniques I originally used to maximize coupon savings. After the presentation, the board chair approached me privately. "Ms. Chen, I've been in manufacturing for 30 years, and I've never seen procurement analysis as thorough and innovative as what you presented today. Your team's recommendations could save us over $50 million annually while improving supplier quality metrics. How did you develop such sophisticated expertise in supply chain optimization?" I smiled, thinking about Sunday mornings spent clipping manufacturer coupons at my kitchen table. It started with paying very close attention to how pricing and promotions actually work in retail markets. Once you understand the underlying dynamics, the principles can be scaled to much larger purchasing decisions. Looking back on the journey from family mockery to boardroom presentations, I realized that the most important lesson wasn't about vindication or proving skeptics wrong. It was about recognizing that valuable skills can develop through any activity that requires systematic analysis, careful attention to detail, and persistent optimization efforts. My relatives had laughed at my coupon obsession because they saw only the surface activity, not the underlying capability development. When Mom's friend asked about my savings empire, she was the first person to recognize that what I had built represented transferable business skills rather than just money-saving tactics. The expertise that started with 15-cent savings on household products had evolved into strategies that generated millions of dollars in value for major corporations. The analytical thinking, attention to detail, and systematic approach that had once been dismissed as embarrassing were now being sought after by the world's largest companies. The woman who had once felt ashamed of organizing coupons at family gatherings was now teaching procurement strategies to Harvard MBAs and presenting supply chain solutions to Fortune 100 executives. The skills that had been mocked as desperate penny pinching were now recognized as sophisticated business capabilities that could create competitive advantages worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Sometimes the things that seem most unconventional or embarrassing in the moment are actually the foundations for achievements that exceed everyone's expectations. The key is having the confidence to continue developing expertise even when others don't recognize its value, and the wisdom to understand that skills developed in one context can often be applied successfully in very different environments. My coupon obsession had become the unlikely foundation for a career that generated more success and satisfaction than I had ever imagined possible. The journey taught me that expertise can come from the most unexpected sources, and that persistence in the face of skepticism is often what separates breakthrough success from abandoned potential. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.